Hey everybody, here's a little animation I've been working on using Adobe Animate. Here's my little play button here. I turned on loop, and when I turned on loop, that created this sort of blue bar here that you can pull around a little bit to create a better loop. You hit your play. Here's my animation so far. I got one of the layers turned off, so let me show you how to turn that on. Right here is a little eyeball. You can turn on or off a layer. I started drawing some leaves in there, but I'm going to get rid of those for now. So you can also lock a layer or unlock a layer. Those are just some of the basic things. I like to put each part on its own layer. There it is. That looks pretty cool. So I'm going to probably have it pause towards the end and maybe do something with leaves coming and falling off like years are passing. Anyway, this is like the basic stuff that Adobe Animate can do. So let's check it out. First thing you may want to do is go up here under File, New, and just start a new project out here. A couple of the settings you might want to be aware of. HD, this is not even HD. See 720, that's not right. You need full HD, 1920 by 1080 if you're going to be working a filmic side to this. I also like to work at 24 frames, which is more filmic. You could do 30. So there's all sorts of different sizes up here you can play with, but this is the one I tend to go with here. Also, you might want to check out these samples here. There's also ways to do some tutorials in here that are pretty awesome. All those can be found underneath this help here. Online tutorials, hands-on tutorials. These are really pretty cool, these hands-on tutorials. Basically, well, the online tutorials, let's check those first. I mean, there's just a lot of really good stuff. Beginner and experienced. There's drawing with brushes, how to draw and animate using variable width strokes, which is kind of a cool new thing. Anyway, I recommend doing every single one of these. This is probably my new favorite thing, asset warping, where you take something, you put this like mesh on it and pull it around and stretch it around. These are really pretty awesome things you can do. So the other thing that you may want to check out is going under help and looking at hands-on tutorials. But you can just open up one of these and it'll open up the files you need, and it'll kind of show you a little tour here of how to make things move here. So I zeroed everything out here, and I'll just kind of do some really basic stuff. Get this square here, or hold it down and get the oval. I'll start with the square. Pick a color that you want to draw with. You can also dump a color in later with this paint bucket here, see? But right now I'll just say, oh, let's make a nice little green square here. So click and drag, hit shift if you want to constrain it. See that? Shift. So here we go. We've got one keyframe here down on the timeline. Jump over, I usually just say go to frame 30, and then you're going to hit one of these buttons here. This will insert a blank keyframe, and this will insert a keyframe. So that's a good way to do this. The other thing you can do, which is what I'm going to do right now, is hit F6. F6 adds a keyframe and kind of extends everything out. And I want you to be bigger, so I'm using the scale tool here. I'm going to grab the corner and make it bigger. And then I also could rotate it if I wanted to using a rotation tool. I can select parts of it. I can draw here. I can erase. You know, I can add a circle. I can make a line. I can use my pen tool to draw something as you do in Illustrator. I can add text. I could dump some color. I could sample a color and put it in my swatches. Swatches right here. It's very Illustrator-y. Okay, so once you open swatches here, you can hit this little plus button, and it'll take the swatch that I've made down here and add it up here so I can keep that color. So we need to do something called tweening in a minute, which is basically I'm going to tell the computer that I want it to do some tweening for me, which means draw all the in-between frames. To make the tweening, what you do is you just get down here on the gray area, and there's no line here to indicate that there's any tweening yet. So you right-click it, and then the one that people generally use is the classic tween. There is motion tween, shape tween, but the most basic, easiest one is create classic tween. Boom. it's going to say, oh, well, you can't do it. You have to make it into a symbol. Just say, don't show me this again. Okay. Turns purple down here, so now you know that there's a tween there. If I right click here, I can also say create classic tween, and then I can jump back here. I'm going to tell it to loop by hitting the loop button again. I'm going to drag out my little blue looper area to show kind of what I want to loop, and I'm going to hit play, and there it goes. I hit control, I drug the keyframe over. So now you can also erase keyframes if you don't like these two here. You can select them, right click it, and then there's clear keyframe, which gets the stuff out of it, or you can just say remove the whole frame. So I just removed the whole frame there, and then I'll add another keyframe, F6. I'll jump over here, I'll move it, and it'll record that for me. I'll jump over here, and then I'll move it, and I'll record that essentially for me. I'll jump over here, I'll move it, and sometimes when you change the size it will tween it for you, but there's other options for that too. So let's hit play here and see what I got moving around. See how it's making it smaller? So those are some of the different ways you can animate using tweening, which is let the computer do it for you and save time so you don't have to do frame by frame animations. So I'm going to lock this layer down here, which is my green layer, which has my little green guy on it doing some cool stuff. And I'm going to go over here to the first frame on a new layer I've created, and I'm going to draw on this layer now using this circle, which is under the square. Here it is. And I've chosen a different color, which is red this time. I'm going to draw out a circle and hit shift to constrain it. Then I'm going to jump later on, and I'm going to hit F6, which will make a nice little keyframe, and then I will right click this and I will say create classic tween for now, and then I will grab this circle, and if I grab it and move it right here, it'll make a new keyframe. So let's say around 15 frames, I'm going to move it over here, and then at about 28 frames, I'll have it up here. So you just kind of have to talk it through where you want it, here, then here, then here, right? So I'm going to pick this yellow color here, and then I am going to go up to this polystar shape, which is down here, and I'm going to go over here to my options on this tool. See, there's properties for every single thing you pick. And on this particular polystar tool, I have a number of sides. I'm going to choose 3 to make a triangle. So here I go. I'm making a triangle. I can spin it around. I can hit shift to constrain it a little bit like that. So that's looking pretty good. Now I'll grab it and scooch it down here. Oh, it left its little edge behind. That's always kind of weird, right? So if you want to avoid that, you have to actually click on it in the timeline and then drag it down, and it'll pull all of it down for you. So I'll double click this and I'll put try on there. So now that I've drawn this little yellow triangle here, I could also go back over here. Now that I've selected this object, maybe I want to change the stroke and make it thicker or get rid of it or whatever. You can even delete the stroke if you want. You can have a different kind of stroke on here. I'm going to change the color to a little bit darker yellow just to show you that it can be done. I'm going to change the stroke to black. So now I have this nice little triangle ready to roll, but I only have 1 frame, so I need to add another keyframe. I'm going to jump just like I have with the others. I'm going to say F6, and then this time I'm going to right click it, and I'm going to say create shape tween, because I know I want to change the shape of this thing. So what I'll do is I'll grab it, draw a marquee over it so I can drag it around. See? Basically you have to select it with the marquee or select the frame that it's on. I'm going to go to Object, and I'm going to click on this little button that says Create Object, and that kind of locks the stroke and the fill together, which will make things a lot easier. So then I'm going to jump down here to the bottom. I'm going to drag this down here, and then because it's on a shape tween, I can click into this shape a little bit and change it, and it will tween it for me. So here I go. I'm going to click on it, and then I'm going to grab one of these dots and scooch it over like that. And so you'll see it starts out as a normal triangle here in the beginning. And as I scroll through here, it's getting weirder and weirder and weirder. So that's how you can do a shape tween. So we got these simple classic tweens. We've got shape tweens. So here's my little movie so far, and that's what I want you guys to do, is just create something simple and ugly like this so you can get used to the tweening stuff. Now let's do a few more advanced things. One is to use this camera here, which is kind of cool. As soon as you click on this camera, I'm going to do it when I'm on the first frame just to prevent troubles. You click Add Camera, and look here, it adds a new layer, which is the camera. And at that point, I can say, all right, here I want to go F6 and add a keyframe, and I want to really zoom in on my shapes. And if you pull it kind of the opposite direction, almost like it's a camera, then you can reframe things a little bit. You can even zoom in more if you wanted to, but I don't need to go in that far. So I also might go back out to here and zoom way back out again. And once you go to the edge here, you can even go further. You just keep going out, and then you can go out again. So that's kind of cool. I don't know if I really need to go quite that far out. So the other thing I might do is do this rotation, where I can click on rotation and actually have it spin around the center of my objects. All right, now it's going to go from here, and it's just going to pop to the new framing. It's going to pop to the new framing. So when it pops like that, obviously we're missing a classic tween and a classic tween, and then that should create a nice little reframing using this camera. There you go. So a couple other things I want you to know about. If you look under assets here, there's a bunch of really cool things you can use and start to play with. You can find props in here. I particularly like this dude because it gives me a chance to study a walk cycle. I'll make a new layer here by clicking this little plus button, new layer. I can get to the first frame here. I can drag my boy walk cycle onto here. So you may want to add a keyframe here and move him. Hit V for selection tool. Move him over. Come over here, hit F6 again. Move him over again. So now he'll be animated as soon as I right click and say classic tween. Right click the gray and say classic tween. So try all these things out. Now I'm going to play it, and he should kind of scoot around while the camera's scooting around too. We're getting some kind of fun things here. So you can also dig into this guy and replace his drawings with your own. Here's how you do that. You just get on a frame of him, you double click him, and it shows the animation that you pulled from over here. Here's all the little parts and pieces of him. If you don't like something, like let's say you don't like where his head is right here, you can grab the transform tool or the move tool. I think this one would be the best one here, the free transform tool. And I can get close to it and maybe rotate his head down a little bit. See that? So now on this particular keyframe, his head's going to be bowing down, and play it. So we should see his head moving right there. Right there. Okay, good. So you can go through here and tweak all these and make them more exaggerated or less exaggerated depending on what you want to do. And when you make your own stuff, it's good to label everything like this. Maybe on the head, I don't like his head, so I can actually double click his head and get into it as a little symbol here, which is just on the first frame at this point. And let me hit Z and zoom in on him. And let's see if we can change some of this stuff on him. So if I do the selection tool and double click it, I'm getting into his hair now. And if I can maybe go into the color palette, and if I don't like his hair, I can change his hair to something else. See that? So that's in the color palette. That's where it's easiest probably to find colors. I can also do sub-selection and say, you know, I don't really like how his head is shaped. I think I'm going to give him like a cone head here. Notice I'm way deep inside of the objects here. I'm inside the head, which is inside the boy's walk cycle, which is inside scene 1. So you really got to kind of get used to digging deeper into an object and then going back out. The advantage to that is that everything is in one layer here instead of tons and tons of layers like it often is in After Effects. So let me go up to here to this little drop down and say Fit in Window. And now you see his hair is permanently in that kind of weird shape I just created. So you could actually cut your own head out that you drew in Illustrator or in here, because the drawing tools are pretty similar, stick that on top of his head and it'll replace the other one or delete the other one and put the head in, and you will be able to use this exact same character but with your own drawings, doing a sideways walking loop there. So I'm going to lock all these layers and I'll show you one of the last things that I really like to do, which is frame by frame drawing, which I think works a lot better in here than it does in After Effects actually, because After Effects makes so many layers a lot of times and it's very limited as to how many lines you can make before it starts kind of bogging down and stuff. But this is all vector and pretty easy to draw. So first thing I'm going to do is I plugged in my Wacom tablet because I want to be able to draw like with the pen shape here. So that'll make a big difference. I locked all these layers. I'm going to add another layer here, layer 9, and I'm going to hit my drawing tool here. I've been using this one, the fluid brush mostly, but you can use this one too. So I click on my fluid brush and then I go over here to Properties, Tool, remember? And now I see all the different things I can do with this pen. It can be pressure sensitive depending on your Wacom tablet. You can have it go fast and it'll change the brush size. There's a lot of different cool settings. I go in and I tweak these a lot, and a lot of times I'll just draw a line like that and then kind of undo that, Control Z, and then I'll change the smoothing, the roundness of it. Maybe I'll change that. So just play with it and see what those different settings do. I can say save as a preset, and I have 12 presets saved. I basically just saved that brush and I can pull it up again if I want to. So on layer 9, I am going to call this frame by frame because that's the type of animation I'm going to do now. And now I'm ready to draw. Okay, so there's my first line, and then what I do is I hit F6 and it will copy that, at which point I can draw a little bit more. And I'll copy that, and I can draw a little bit more. So this keeps what you had before, and you can draw on top of it. Or you can go in and say, you know what, I don't really like all these lines. Let me start getting rid of some of them. And then you hit F6 again, and you're like, I don't know if I like this nose thing. And you can hit your brackets to make your brush bigger. Usually, see how it's making it bigger as I hit brackets. So we can do that, and then I'll go back into my brush, change the color to something else. I'll hit F6 again, which will make a new keyframe for me. So once again, you can erase or start to add things in. And hit play. So there's the drawing I'm starting to make. And once it hits this little keyframe, it just sort of keeps staying. So that's one way you can do your frame by frame. Let's do it one other way here too. Instead of adding in a keyframe, you can add in a blank keyframe and draw on top of that. So let's do that now. I'm going to lock this layer because I'm done with my skull. I'm going to add a new layer in here once again. I'm going to jump to the beginning. So instead of adding these lines on top of each other, on top of each other, on top of each other, another way to do this is to make a new layer here. Here's an eyeball. Let's draw an eyeball here in this first frame. And then instead of doing add a keyframe, which will just keep the eyeball on the next one, I can undo that. And instead I could add a blank keyframe. Oh no, where did it go? Well, there's a blank keyframe there. It's ready to be drawn. The problem is that you don't have onion skinning on. This is a really cool feature that they don't really have very well in After Effects. You can't see multiple frames. Here you can see as many frames as you've got here. It's a little bit off colored now. See how it's blue? That means that I'm actually seeing the first frame through the second frame. So now I can draw this like this, draw this like this, you know, and I can sort of make it start to close a little bit. I'm seeing the frame right before and the frame before that. It gets lighter and lighter as you go back. So I will hit this blank keyframe. Alright, so here's what I got so far. See how my eye is sort of pinching down right there? That's what I'm working on. So it becomes, once again, a blank keyframe. And then you draw it, blank keyframe. And you draw, blank keyframe. You draw. So now I've got these frames here. So those are some cool things you can do to draw using this. Remember, onion skinning here. You can select all the frames to onion skin. You can select just a few, or you can set up your own parameters there if you want to play around with that a little bit. Also, there's some nice tweening buttons here that you can just push. Instead of right-clicking it and doing Create Classic Tween, you can select some of these buttons right here, which will do it for you. See that? Insert Classic Tween. The other ones are grayed out because it doesn't really want to do those in this section here. Okay, so I've zoomed in on my little dude here, and I want to do some, basically what's the equivalent of puppet pinning in After Effects. I want to add a weird joint into his arm here just to show you how this is done. This is a really cool tool. It's a little on the newer side, Asset Warp tool. So I'm sort of want to get deeper into scene one and actually get into this arm here. So I'm going to take my selection tool, kind of double click the arm, and now I'm into his animation, but I can't add these pins like I want to. See, it won't allow me to do it. So I have to do a weird thing called break apart. You right click it, and then there's this thing called Control B, break apart. And what it does is it kind of makes his arm editable. So let me do that a second time, and now I can put this little pin right here. I could put another pin and a bone right here and some other bones and things. So, and then you can start to move his arm and do weird things with it and bend it in different ways. So let me do a little mesh warp on this green square here. I will grab the pin tool, try to click on it. It's not working, so I need to right click it, break it apart, and now I can add a pin here and a bone up here if I want. I could add some bones and pins all through here and just experiment with this. Once I click off of it, I'm ready to move it a little bit. I can select this and I can start to mesh warp this. I can have it kind of do weird things here with the mesh. So that's something you may want to play with. It's pretty fun. The other thing you can do is tween that. You know, if I'm working down here on layer 1, and if I go over here to this area and change it again, you know, come down here and grab all my mesh and all. The other thing I could do is I can actually change it over time. So I have to jump a little later in this line, hit F6, and then it's going to make a tween for me, good old classic tween. At which point I can just change it some more, do some more weird things with this shape, you know, have a little fun with it, and maybe even move it here a little bit. And what should happen is the shape goes from being one shape and it tweens it to another shape like that. All right, so play around with all those things. It's pretty cool to do the mesh warp. It's pretty fun to do the F6 and do some tweening. And it's a lot of fun to do a frame-by-frame animation, whether you copy what you drew and draw on top of that and erase parts of it, or whether you add a blank keyframe and use onion skin to keep drawing on a blank keyframe. So there's a lot of different fun ways of creating a nice, ugly piece of art, which is a good way to learn. You don't need to make a masterpiece when you're just playing around and trying to get this thing to work. So here's what I've got so far. Very exciting, wonderful art here.